Well, those are Yuri 1As. They actually have Army plates on the front of them. They were commissioned by the United States Information Agency, which was a part of the CIA, to broadcast propaganda speeches during the Cold War. It's the only military spec limiter that Yuri ever made, and they only made 87 of them, apparently.
What kind of propaganda, like analog versus digital propaganda?
I have no idea.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio.
Hello, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to meet with recording professionals, to hear their stories and learn from their experiences so that you can take your records to the next level and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is David Kalmusky, a producer, guitarist, engineer, and mixer. In 2012, David helped design and build Addiction Sound Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, along with engineer studio designer Chris Huston, whose credits include Led Zeppelin and The Who, and studio owner Jonathan Cain of Journey, Bad English, and The Babies. At Addiction Sound, David and Jonathan host their shared tracking room and individual production and mix rooms. I'm joining you today from David's mix room, Studio B. Is that what you guys call it here, Studio B?
Yeah, it's kind of boring. Studio B for boring, I guess. We should have named it something really cool.
All right, cool. Well, I'll keep going here. David is deeply involved in the local audio community, hosting Recording Academy, NAAM, and local manufacturer events, and has regularly appeared on top 10 Billboard charts, spanning several genres, including credits on 2 Billboard number ones. David is also an expert with Pro Tools, having worked with the Avid platform since its beginning. So we will definitely dig into some great questions about that too. And his multi-platinum Grammy-nominated work includes Journey, Justin Bieber, Emerson Drive, The Fray, Shawn Mendes, Vince Gill, and John Oates, to name just a few of the hundreds of artists with which David has recorded and toured. I've known David for years and owe a great deal of my own professional network here in Nashville and beyond to the connections that David has helped me create. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm very excited to be joining David Kalmusky here at Addiction Sound Studios. Please welcome David Kalmusky to Recording Studio Rockstars. Dave, are you ready to rock?
I've been rocking since 1986.
Dude, I know you have. You know, I wrote down David Kalmusky, and then I wrote down Dave, are you ready to rock? I can't even remember. Do I call you Dave?
David.
David, that's what I thought. So,
and that goes for everyone else out there that calls me Dave.
Right on, man. So I don't know who that Dave guy is that's ready to rock. Maybe
Dave's
an alter ego.
Here.
Dave's not here, exactly. Would you like to introduce yourself in your own words and tell us who you are?
You did such a great job of it. I think people get the idea.
Well, so tell us a little bit more about sort of how you got started in all this and where you came from.
My father was actually one of the original bass players for the Hawks in 1958, and Levon Helm actually wrote a piece about it in his book, This Wheel's on Fire, where Richard Manuel, who, later was a member of the band, and John Till, who was later a member of the Full Tilt Boogie Band, and my father were in their hometown band opening for the Hawks, and Ronnie made Levon fire the whole band and hire my dad and John and Richard Manuel. And that was the start of many things, the trajectory for the band and Bob Dylan and the trajectory for Janis Joplin's last band. My father ended up hanging around with the crew, Albert Grossman and Todd Rundgren, and a lot of people that did the very first recordings at Bearsville Studios in Woodstock, New York, which was kind of their base of operation. And my dad came to Nashville in 1968 and worked with Cowboy Jack at what is now the Sound Emporium. So, man, I really grew up with it. Even when he was in our hometown, we had a little studio in the back of our house that we referred to as the back room. So I was literally born in that environment.
That's cool, man.
And have never known anything different. I mean, I was honestly... I had a reel-to-reel in my bedroom, and I was doing sound on sound and playing with microphones rather than toy cars and things when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. When I was 8 years old, I was doing little mix downs and taking cassettes of my father's band into school for show and tell. And a lot of the kids were bringing in, popsicle stick houses and macaroni art. And I was like, I recorded this and mixed it down to a cassette of my father's band. And they were like, well, and I'm playing the music, and they're like, did you record this off the radio? And I'm like, no, this is my mix. And then I'd fail because they didn't believe or understand the process. So I was always in school daydreaming about getting back to my room and my father's musical instruments and studio. And it was just, that was always nagging at me, no matter what my obligations as a 7 or 8 year old were. I just wanted to be in the studio. And so those were my evenings.
This is up in Woodstock. That's where you guys were, and that's where you were growing up?
Well, I was actually raised in Stratford, Ontario, which was the town that I mentioned that Richard Manuel and John Till and my father were from. And it's where my father's backroom studio in our house was, and where I spent all of my formative years of watching musicians like, John Till and the Hawks and many, many musicians play. My earliest memories in life are sitting on amplifiers, watching these guys play. And when I was a little older, I even got to work the tape machine.
That must have been really cool. I'd like to think I have a home studio. I'm recording. I'm doing my thing. I'm not working with Levon Helm every day. But
well, neither am I. Honestly, I was a kid. I was a child, and so these were my father's friends, and I was oblivious. They were just like, I was pretty oblivious. I had such a great experience in all of that, but it was just a regular day, I guess.
So what was your first instrument? Were you picking up guitars?
I played drums at first,
Of course, why not? You get to bang on things.
Yeah. And then I joined a band, and our guitar player, he'll never hear this, so who cares? He was not very good, and I was arguing chord changes with him. And I had a guitar because my father gave me a guitar, but I just wasn't any good at it. And he went away one weekend, and I learned our whole set list on guitar, like in one weekend. And we were just kids in the neighborhood, but he had been taking lessons for 7 years, and came back, and in one weekend, I knew this stuff better than he did. So our band fired him, and I stayed on guitar, and that's writing history. I've always approached it as a producing musician. Later in my career, when I got to do records, I'd produce a record with a band, and then I'd go tour the record for a year. So I'd make 1 or 2 records a year, and then I'd tour the world and get to play and live on a bus and make music with musicians. And then slowly I'd make 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 records a year, and I'd end up staying in Nashville longer and longer. And then eventually, it was like, I can't leave,
Yeah.
I can't go out on the road. So I haven't left Nashville in about 6 years.
Yeah, I've pretty much only seen you here in this room or in the room over there, Studio A.
I'll go for one day. I went and played in New York, about a month and a half ago for a day. And, I play a little bit around town, but I'm playing in the studio every day.
Do you feel like that change is sort of a reflection of your own career path, or also a reflection of the industry? Do you ever miss those times where you just focus on 1 or 2 records in the year and then go out and perform that music for a long stretch?
In the early years, getting to see the world is fantastic, and it still is. I mean, I still say to anybody, if you got a 10-day run in Europe or somewhere I want to go, feel free to call me. I kind of became that kid in school daydreaming about the studio when I was out on the road. I'd love it for a week or two, but on a 6-week run, after about the 5th show, I'd be like, I had rooms and studios set up, and I was missing it.
Yeah.
This is my passion. I love recording and creating music, and I love performing it, but that's the beautiful thing about Nashville is I get to do both. Everybody in town's so overwhelmingly talented that every time you go out, it's world class. It's amazing. So this is really just, the perfect combination of everything for me.
It's kind of good. Had you started out in Nashville, you might have been afraid to play in bands all the time.
Well, and there was a natural evolution of coming to Nashville. When I came to Nashville as a very young man to try to record, I was getting my ass handed to me by every intern who could get better drum sounds than me, and all the demo guitar players had a million better ideas than me. So I needed that time period to kind of humble myself and listen and blend in and figure out all of this knowledge that's being shared in town is really a magical thing. I describe it to some people as if I have a problem that I encounter, and if it's a really elaborate, maybe computer problem or something, and I Google and I search and I call all my friends and I work for 4 days on it, and then I find the magic fix. 3 months later, you say to me, I've got this problem. I go, well, here's your fix.
Right.
And in 1 second, you get the benefit of days and weeks of my research and work. That's Nashville times 5,000. How to mic something, how to record something, why things sound really great. I also don't believe in fitting in and conforming to any kind of standard, but in lieu of your own creativity, starting out with the standards will start you within the parameters of excellence, which is a really great place to start. You know, if you're exposed to this kind of environment and this is your starting place, you have all the room in the world to grow into your own individual. And
yeah, Nashville's just so full of professionals on every level, every aspect of music and recording, that there's always somebody you can turn to learn something from.
Absolutely. I learn every day. I've been doing this every day of my life easily for 30 years, maybe even closer to 40. Actually, yeah, I've been doing this for 40 years. You know,
yeah, elbow macaroni.
Which is shocking because I still consider myself a young dude. And I love, man, you know, I got to record, Victor Krauss on upright bass. And am I going to walk in to that room with my arrogance as an engineer and put my favorite mic up? Or am I going to take the opportunity to say, well, what's your favorite mic? How do you like to mic it? In Nashville, I get in the room with people I admire tremendously on a regular basis. I'll ask Jerry Douglas how to mic a dobro rather than just put my microphone up. And you know, and sometimes in those environments, in those two environments specifically, of course, I learned a whole lot and it was amazing. Sometimes I'll ask somebody what they like and I won't prefer it.
Right. Or they might not know.
And it's okay. You know, it's all good, but you can't just rely on what you've learned in the past to move forward. You've got to be open and learning. Man, I'm still here at midnight learning new software, playing with hardware. I buy stuff on eBay all the time, plug it in, mess around with it. If I don't like it, I sell it back on eBay. I mean, I'm still growing. So I always say to the interns about passion, it's not about work ethic. It's if you're not compelled to do this, if this doesn't keep you up at night and wake you up in the morning because you're excited and curious to hear something, just in and of itself, not for the payoff, not for making hit records or where this could land you, for the results itself of what is obsessing you, then find something else to do because you've got me to catch up to and I'm still going.
Right.
You know what I
You've been doing
mean?
it for 40 years.
It's like I've been doing this for 40 years and I am still, seriously, drive by, you'll see the lights on at 11, midnight, 1 a.m. I'm still here. And it's not that I don't have a life. I take moments to celebrate my life with my friends. Usually this is the center of operation, though. You know,
Yeah.
It's not about not having a life and being an obsessive workaholic. It really is about what compels you. And that's the end result of this. It's not anything that I set out to spend a certain amount of hours for a certain amount of payoff. You know, it's like I just do this and then I poke my head up once in a while and go, okay, I'm doing all right. I get to continue to do this. I might work on 100 records, but only get to hang 2 on the wall. And some of my favorite records I've ever worked on, you've never heard of. They're just sitting on a hard drive. They didn't get released or they got shelved. Some of the most average stuff I've worked on, maybe it's gone platinum, and then everything in between. Some of my proudest moments are out on that wall, you know? I mean, but it's not about that at all. That's what happens when you poke your head up and check the mail.
Yeah, and sometimes proud moments are making a particular sound in the studio. Maybe the record itself didn't go anywhere, but that sound was fantastic.
In fact, that's kind of when I give a tour of the studio, that's sort of my regime, is like I have a folder with some of my favorite musical moments of things that we've stumbled across, and I get to play them something wacky we did in the studio floor so they get to hear the floor, or making a sample out of the railing in the lobby and using it instead of an 808 sample. And obviously our echo chamber and the plates that I've collected over the years and certain things like that. But yeah, it's not all about here's the most successful thing I've ever done or anything like that. It's not the name droppy folder. It's definitely cool audio moments folder.
Yeah. Here's a moment where the kick and the snare and the crash and the bass and the guitars all just landed together, and boy, did it sound great on this opening chord.
Yeah, exactly.
So Dave, I like to ask our guests to start us off with an inspirational quote. Have you got anything you'd like to share with us to get us psyched up about doing this other than give up now?
Man, I probably have a ton of quotes of my own, but I'm going to say every quote ever uttered in an advice format that came out of the mouths of great people like Steve Jobs or Brian Eno. Do a Google search for advice from David Bowie. You know, it really all resonates around don't let, the opinion of others drown out your inner voice. If you are passionate enough, and again, if you just follow what compels you, you'll be unbelievably successful. And that doesn't immediately come in the form of money and multi-million-dollar studios and everything that, it doesn't just instantly transform around you, but you do poke your head up every once in a while and go, man, am I ever excited to wake up and participate in the world today? I'm just citing all the cliches, do what you love, but man, that's it. It really is. And I mean, if somebody treats you horrible and you don't like them, don't work with them. It's really that simple. I've modeled my entire life around the fact that I don't give people my time that don't appreciate me at all. Even if I'm broke and starving, I'll find a way to just spend my time celebrating it with people that mutually like and respect each other. And so you perpetuate what you are, and in turn, you just end up filling all of your moments and your collaborations with people that are your people. Build your own tribe.
Yeah. Well, I know as I get older, it gets easier and easier for me to quickly come to the conclusion that somebody is somebody I don't want to work with.
I used to quit bands all the time. I mean, and people would give me advice. Oh, you got to stick it out. You got to pay your dues. Yeah. And the thing is I did pay my dues, but I paid my dues in environments that were challenging and inspiring. I didn't pay my dues being suppressed. If you look through my chronology, if I lasted any length of time at any point in my career, it was because I was learning and growing and I was appreciated. There are certainly moments of time where I did get in the room and professionally complete and sign off on some work I had gotten myself into and then never involve myself again, whether it was being in a band or recording a record with an artist or, any of that. You don't have as much of that luxury when you start out, obviously. I mean, you gotta try to stay in the ring, but keep it in the back of your head and ask yourself if you really have to do that. I would always turn down a paid gig if I could survive by taking almost a pro bono gig recording somebody unbelievably talented. My whole point is that if you don't believe in what you're working on, if you're just doing it for the money and you're like, I'm recording somebody tremendously, that thinks they're entitled and incredibly untalented, and I don't believe that this is ever going to be anything great, and I'm not contributing anything great to my art form, to my sizzle reel, to, the musical moments that I want to contribute. Hey, man, if you got to take the money, tough it out or whatever. But my whole point is once you kind of slip into just doing work for hire like that, nothing becomes out of most of that.
Yeah.
More than anything else, the most valuable commodity is your time and how you spend it.
Because you can only spend it once.
And how are you spending that first 10,000 hours? I mean, the first 1,000 of that, don't listen to anything I'm saying. Right. Just get in the room and find and make any excuse. But I guess everything I'm saying is for people who have already kind of gotten into the room and they've gotten their feet wet and they've got a little bit of respect in some circles and then they're being walked on in other circles. I guess at that moment in time, when you get to analyze what you're going to spend time on, spend your time on all your proudest musical moments more than your biggest financial moments.
Yeah.
And then the rest will come.
All right. So now share with us a story of an important failure for you on your career path. Maybe there was a time where you had to get out from under a situation that wasn't working for you.
In this business, I think most of my personal failure is the fact that we're all kind of freelance. We do work for a lot of different camps and teams and artists, and it's such a diverse group of people and a diverse amount of pay. And when I started getting into some gigs that perhaps were more, were more money than I'd ever made before, I'd spend it all. And I found through the years myself in some really difficult predicaments. And so I guess my failures a lot were sort of self-management. I'd have to go out on the road and I'd have to leave the studio and places that I wanted to be because I had to make some money and pay off debt. And it's kind of tying into what I said before is don't just always chase the money. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're spending all your money, then you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're always having to chase the money.
Yeah.
Then you got to be in a bad band if they're who's offering you money. Then you've got to be in the room recording somebody who doesn't respect you if you always really need the money. It's just hard to tell a 20-year-old to just think of the long term, but this is a really up and down industry, and the people I know who were really smart. Almost, you're a business person. You're setting yourself up. You're investing in yourself. Don't think because you've made a certain amount that is always the bar as to which you will be paid. You need to do pro bono projects. You need to be involved in things because they're amazing and there's a pedigree of talent that you haven't been invited to take part in. And sometimes you're not always invited to partake in the monetization of that. It's like an intern being able to come into the studio and just hang around this greatness for free for,
Yeah, we're always interning on some level.
We're always interning. I'm interning. I get invited to participate, or maybe I'm working on a project and I decide they asked me to do some roughs, but I decide to actually do what I do, which is mix the whole album. And they don't see me in here obsessing. I've done that several times in my career to the point where I know we're going to be working on the record for several months and they're going to hear it a certain way, and then when they send it out to another mixer, I've actually won gigs that way where I wasn't being paid at all and I'd spend tons of my own time, and they'd call me back and go, "Man, I don't know what you did with your roughs," and I'd always just save a little bit of extra magic though, just so that I could, when I got hired, I could justify some time,
a little stash of
I'd
fairy
play
dust
with some extra reverbs, and I'd invite the guys in to close the mixes, and I'd EQ a few extra things and stuff. But man, I'd make my roughs pretty darn good, and I'd spend tremendous amount of time, kind of without bragging, without a single word of me trying to promote myself to the band. I just show them what I do just by having it magically appear.
Well, that was advice that I heard Chris Lordalgi give once to a room full of students, that every time you have the opportunity to...
I'm sorry, who's that?
Some guy out on the West Coast. The idea was, when you turn in a rough mix on something, always make it your best possible, because
that's it.
It's a chance to blow people away, too.
It is. Just do what you do, man. Make it sound great with as much time as you have. I mean, honestly, I feel like I can dial a mix in pretty great that is probably showing about 90% of my capabilities in about 2-3 hours. Even if I spend a day a song mixing a record with a big budget, most of those major bold decisions kind of get made pushing it all in, pushing it all up.
Yeah.
And so, why would you make roughs that sound horrible? Sometimes as you go, though, if you're the guy mixing the record, because you're the guy recording the record, and you don't want them to fall in love with the roughs,
make it sound horrible.
You just got to be your own manager. There are times I honestly sabotage the roughs, and actually even verbally say that. I don't do anything secretively. I go, these roughs are all completely out of perspective, totally fader up, and I'm not going to make them sound great. It's like there's some element that's so tragically out of perspective, it's a little annoying to listen to, just so that people don't fall in love with it.
I don't know that it's necessarily a Nashville term, but certainly we all know the expression rough mix-itis.
Or demo love or any of that
yeah.
stuff. I've just argued two completely different methodologies that I employ. There's no finite way, man. You just have to kind of figure it out. Welcome
to the paradox that is making records.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. You just got to figure it out.
So tell us about something you're excited about right now. What's going on, this year for you that's kind of exciting?
I got to do something cool, which was co-produce with John Oates from Hall & Oates' Christmas single with the Time Jumpers. So I got to record a Western swing with an 80s pop singer doing something really cool. It was really different for me.
And I'm guessing that was probably in the month of July.
It was in the month of July. It was 100 degrees out, and we had every room full. We had, triple fiddles in here, and Vince Gill and Paul Franklin and Andy, and drums and upright bass. Like every room was just completely filled full of guys.
Did you guys put up Christmas lights and vibe it out? No. Well, what's funny is that I never realized that until somebody told me about that. But all the Christmas music always gets recorded in the dead of summer in July, because that's how long you need to get it ready before Christmas and out on a CD.
I'm working constantly with very young people who haven't gotten necessarily their break yet, and in this town I've gotten to work with a young Lennon and Maisie off the Nashville TV show, and a very young Hunter Hayes on some writer publishing demos long before, he was signed. And I'm super excited about everything I get to do. We've had an amazing year. We had, recently we've had The Fray in, and Journey, and John Oates, and I did a little work on the last Shawn Mendes record. It's all fantastic, and I'm very blessed to have the work I have. My real excitement is stuff that no one's heard yet, and I really hope that people get to hear it. I love getting in a room with an artist who's just found themselves, getting to make that debut record and get through that process. I think I'm valuable as a mentor in that process, and as a producer, and as an engineer, and as a coach, and as somebody really positive. And I don't always get to do the records either, and that's fine. And sometimes I do get to do the records. Sometimes I get to do an artist's records long after they're established. Nashville's not competitive in that way, I don't think. It's a really great environment and community. And I don't mope around going, well, I developed material with that artist, and when they got signed, the label put them with another producer. Well, that's life, man. I've been that producer.
Right.
So you just stay in the game. You keep your head down. You make a lot of music, and sometimes you get those calls, and sometimes an artist, my advice to the artist I had one artist come and say, I feel like I'm cheating on you. I said, are you kidding me? Go do this amazing record with an A-list producer and label support. We'll be friends forever. And this is awesome.
I think I've found that myself too, that more often than not, or every time when an artist has gone on to work with somebody else, it was either the right thing for the artist to do, or the work that was created was just another level from where I was at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about working with Jonathan Cain. So Jonathan Cain, keyboard player with Journey. You guys built this studio, and
we built this city.
Tell us a little bit about working with him.
So
share a good story.
So the John Cain story is a tremendously long one, but I'll try to condense it into the fact that I was actually working with his daughter. We were recording vocals together, and she had worked with a lot of different people, and we just hit it off. It was just one of those things. And he loved the vocal sound we were getting, and she was bringing our roughs home saying, where are you recording this? What's going on? I mean, she'd made a lot of music at that point. So he was like, I want to come to the studio and meet this guy. And immediately we had a Bearsville connection. He recorded his first solo record at Bearsville, and I explained my father's history at the beginning of this whole thing. We were both gearheads, and we loved a lot of the same gear. And then we talked about, the mic selection on his daughter, and why I chose the mic I did, et cetera, et cetera. He was like, man, do you want to record the vocals for the Journey record?
Wow.
And, after we had done some work together, because Kevin Shirley had gotten very, very busy and had basically asked them to record some vocals on their own. So it was just the perfect timing and the perfect Nashville environment. And of course, I said yes, and then became friends with Neil Sean and Arnell, and they came to Nashville, and we recorded the vocals in my little studio. The whole time, I was looking for a place. Jonathan was selling his home in California and his studio in California. So we became great friends, and we would talk about, maybe we should build a studio. And I'm like, well, man, I'm good for like about 4% of what you're good for if we go in on something together. It's funny. I have more gear than John, which is great.
We need to talk about your gear. We're surrounded. So we're coming to you
because I have the tiny little room over here, and everybody, Mike Rhodes at Skinny Fish, who wired all this stuff, always makes a joke. He goes, why don't you move over to Studio A? And I'm like, no, I like little intimate rooms with all my stuff, but it's, kind of stacked up to the ceiling. John is not like just a rich rock star that just spends money and has everybody do stuff for him. We would sit around and audition preamps together and listen to gear, and he comes in with his ball cap and his screwdriver and takes stuff apart, and he's one of us, man. He really is. And so that's the thing is this partnership with Jonathan was very natural because he's one of us. I wouldn't have done this necessarily with an investor that had any commercial expectations. I don't want to run a commercial studio, or neither of us really have any interest in that. He really is enamored by engineering and acoustics and the room, and we built an echo chamber together, and he listens to every microphone, and he and I fight it out, and he's got preferences and I do. He's had a tremendous amount of success, and obviously this building and this place couldn't possibly have happened without him. Interestingly enough, I've been approached to manage and or run or participate in commercial studios in the past, bringing my gear and myself into other rooms and commercial environments, and I was always completely dead against it because I've been self-sufficient and I've always been freelance, and like I said before, I jump in the room with people that I really like. John and I just became such tremendous friends through the process of making that Journey record together. Fast forward through that, I ended up taking over recording the overdubs and mixing that record and supervising the mastering of it. So
what's the name of the record?
The Journey Eclipse album.
Okay, great. Awesome.
All with Kevin Shirley's blessings. I mean, it really came to the point where they had gone over in such an extended timeline that Kevin was, he had 5 other records on deck and was saying to them, you're going to lose me for a little while till I can jump back in the queue. And I was already in the mix of things, and Kevin was listening to my mixing and really liked them. He gave his blessing, which was unbelievable.
So, perhaps it had something to do with the fact that you had set yourself up to be in that flexible freelance position so that when an opportunity came along, you weren't.
Yeah, if my mixes sucked, I would have been out of the loop. If I got bad vocal sounds, I would have been out of the loop. A little bit of luck goes a long way in this town, and there was some of that. But I mean, I got great vocal sounds with John's daughter. I worked really hard. I cared about her vocal enough to put up 7 or 8 different mics and pick the best one, and all of that. Just always do your best. It's like crank that mix out. And the same thing with the Journey. When I got my hands on it, I mixed it. I dialed it up. I wasn't trying to steal the gig. In fact, I knew I wouldn't ever have it because Kevin Shirley was producing the record. Interestingly enough, he liked my mixes enough to sign off on them and go, you should mix this record. And once you get that blessing to go ahead, you fast forward years later, the band flew me to Tokyo and I produced Journey live at Budokan and did the live simulcast. And we've done lots of stuff together. I did 4 solo Neil Sean records, 3 or 4 solo projects with Jonathan, including the studio. All of that, came from, I guess, not even the work ethic, but the compulsion to just do all of that stuff. It's a long story. That's why I said it's hard to kind of condense it. It sounds like it happened overnight, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It started with a relationship, recording music with his daughter. Then it turned into being the guy recording vocals with his band, and then a friendship imparted. And then I got to do some mixing and do some recording. And I have a good demeanor. I'm a decent hang.
I think the clear indicator is, just momentum, just staying on the course and being there the whole time until you can get through those 10 years of setting it all up.
Yeah. And then when it came time to actually do this, John was just sort of like, okay, I found this property in Berry Hill because I live 6 doors down from here. And I called him up and said, man, I found a little cottage. Maybe we could split it or whatever. And then it was like, no, dude, I sold my house and studio in California. And like, if we're going to do this, let's do it. Let's call Chris Huston.
That's cool.
Let's build our dream tracking room. And, he's had that Fazioli grand piano, wanted the perfect room for it. We hadn't really counted on the echo chamber. That was kind of a last minute. We knew that there was no room in the blueprints of this building to build an echo chamber. And one day I was out back and I saw the Bobcat tractors start to dig up what was left of the asphalt so that we could pour some concrete. And they were digging pretty deep at one point because I think they had to put an electrical or some line in. And I snapped a photograph, and John was, touring in South America, and I just, sent him a text saying, "Underground echo chamber, speak now or forever hold your peace, ha, 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 ha." And then, sure enough, the phone rings, and it's like, let's do it, man.
That's great.
So we rebuilt a replica Abbey Road Studio 2's echo chamber under our parking lot.
Wow, man. Well, is that something we can poke our head into?
We can't. It's totally sealed off and buried under the parking lot.
Amazing.
There's a manhole that's like a sewer grate steel bolted lid. Eventually we want to get a submarine hatch for it.
That's cool.
So we can climb down
cool.
there.
That's cool.
But you and I can listen to it.
All right, we'll listen to it. We'll make a little soundbite or something. Let's geek out on some of the studio stuff here for a minute. You guys have built a beautiful studio. We're surrounded by gear. You're sitting in front of a console. You're also the smartest man I know about Pro Tools. So what would you like to say about your work method? How do you interface with all your tools and use both Pro Tools and all this outboard gear?
Okay, well, I mean, The best advice I ever got was the least important part of your gear is the G. Don't use all your stuff. I collect things that I love for their uniqueness in different situations, and it's maybe why I have such a variation of gear as well. Always listen. What does this need? What's it missing? Wow, I bet you the 175 would sound amazing on this vocal, but if there's a vocal that's, the singer is already kind of self-compressing or maybe a little dark sounding, you would choose something completely different. The same thing goes with plugins. I mean, I have a lot of gear, but I think the philosophy for some of your listeners who will only have access to plugins is like, don't have a go-to chain for the main elements. I know, if you like something on a snare, but how many different drummers hit different snares differently? I mean,
they hit the same snare differently.
Yeah, I know. You want to hear that kit sound awful after Greg Morrow's played it. I'll go sit down and play it for 5 minutes, and nothing's changed but the guy.
Yeah,
and it's certainly not the same drum sound. So really learn what a piece of gear does, and then use it as a choice, not as a go-to or a necessity. There are go-tos. I always use a 57 on a snare drum, and I like Sennheisers on toms, and lots of guys don't. And I replace my KM84s on the overheads with a pair of Josephsons, and they're kind of always up. There are certain go-tos that I'll start with, but man, I'll move those mics around or I'll change that choice instantly if something needs something differently. I like to listen to everything and then kind of decide, knowing what I know about gear and the gear that I have and own, I really get to intimately know what every piece of gear sounds like. I already know what to expect. So when I'm auditioning it, I'm usually right. Sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm very surprised by how a piece of gear sounds.
Did you mention the mic and the kick drum out there? I don't think you did.
The mic in the kick drum or on the kick drum?
Oh, good question. Which one? Tell us about both.
I got a D112 inside it, and I'm sorry, I got a Beta 52 inside it.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah. And I've got a FET 47 on the outside of it.
I haven't used the FET 47 a ton, but I have used it in the past, and it really is remarkably great on the outside of a kick drum and right up on a big guitar amp too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of FET 47-ish mics. I've got a pair of Charter Oki 700s that I use on the outside of a kick all the time. I really like them.
For some of our listeners who are maybe looking for affordable starting mics, are there some inexpensive mics that you've really enjoyed using? Stuff that always seems to come up, or recently that you've heard you've really liked?
Man, I have a great mic locker here. I've got a U47 and a 251, and I've got a lot of custom microphones that our friend Shannon Rhodes has modded and made. I've got a C12, blah blah blah. I use the Mic Tech microphones a lot. I've used the Ashton microphones a lot. So there's a price range of $300 to $1,500 or $2,000. If it sounds great, use it. Just print it. Whatever, man. I've shot singers out on an array of microphones and ended up using a Shure SM7 on the album.
We're on a pair of Mic Tech PM9s right now for this interview.
And a great local company and great people, and they really do make great products. Arnell from Journey's out singing all his ballads on a PM9.
John Oates.
John Oates and Daryl Hall on Daryl's House is using PM9s. John Oates is on a PM9. Mic Tech is a great company, and they make great products. The great thing about eBay is that you can buy a piece of gear, even if it's cheap and weird, plug it in, try it out, and if you decide you don't like it, you can just put it back up and sell it. And, if you have the overhead to try it out, I've made money testing gear. Trying gear. I've actually put it back on eBay a week later because I thought it was awful and made $50. And, Phil Moore, who makes retro instruments, saw the fact that I have an ADL Compex limiter across my drum bus. And he said, man, you ever tried the Shure PA mixer? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And if you moved your suitcase and look at the bottom of the rack, I got a Shure PA mixer for $49. And he said the limiter is basically the same circuit.
Wow.
So they're the same limiters. One's a $3,000 piece of gear. One's a $49 piece of gear. So I'd A/B them and go, sometimes I record with two kits. So I'll put that across my other kit bus. And man, it really does the Compex thing for $49.
That's very cool. Is it Boz or something that came out with a plugin it looks similar to that Compex? I don't know if that
I believe so. Yeah,
after.
I've seen it surface on Facebook. And so the funny thing is, I went to find a faceplate for that Shure mixer so I could rack it, and the faceplate cost $89. So the faceplate was worth more than the gear.
I thought maybe you were going to say you looked to find a faceplate that would cover it up and disguise it so nobody knew what it was.
No, I'm proud of it, man. I mean, here's the thing. You look at the rack, I've got a couple of 175s and 176s and a stay level and a record cutter next to an iPad running alpha software that won't be released till 2017, you know,
That's cool.
And it's like technology sitting here from 1938 to 2017. Some pieces in this rack are worth $7,000 or $8,000 for one mono channel, and some pieces in this rack are worth $49.
Tell us about these CIA modules that you were talking about.
Okay, well, those are URI 1As, and there's one article on the Universal Audio site about them. They actually have Army plates on the front of them that read United States Information Agency. And they were commissioned by the United States Information Agency, which was a part of the CIA, to broadcast propaganda speeches during the Cold War. It's the only military spec limiter that URI ever made, and they only made 87 of them, apparently.
What kind of propaganda, like analog versus digital propaganda?
I have no idea. And a Facebook friend that, you know, knew I collected gear and just asked if I was interested in them, and he wanted some studio time. So we bartered out a really good price for me and some studio time, and he came and recorded a project, and I bought 4 of them. So I got 4 of the 87. He put a 5th one up, and our next door neighbors bought it. They're really unbelievable. They're a Blue Stripe 1176 on its very fastest setting at a hard ratio of 10-1.
Wow. So just set it and forget it kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really adjustable, but it does that thing. So it's extremely aggressive in a beautiful way. You know, if you really want that sound, I patch it in, and I've used it on the lead vocal of records without parallel processing it. Sometimes I'll parallel process it and A/B it and decide whether I want to use it or a different limiter, but it's a really unique, special piece of gear that's kind of my secret magic sauce.
So do you do some parallel processing in the recording stage? Do you set things up where you're doing that while you're tracking a vocal, or is it always in the
Never
mix stage?
while I'm tracking. I do parallel process the drum bus while I'm tracking often.
You want to talk about just for a second about what that is?
I put a bus compressor across the headphones as well and try to glue it together and get the headphone to mix sounding as amazing as possible so that when I make big decisions like pulling the room mics up, the musicians start to play differently. You know, it's not, those aren't post decisions. I actually track very aggressively. I'm not afraid to carve things or EQ things or make decisions in the tracking room that are going to influence the actual performance itself.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky to have a room where I can experiment in my downtime. And I've mic'd every corner of that room and brought in a scissor lift and listened to where the room mics should have been placed on the ceiling before we even put the box up. And that's a great luxury to have. So I do a lot of compression to tape. I do a lot of parallel processing on the drum bus to tape. And sometimes I don't use it. Sometimes I'll get back in the mix room and go, nah, I want to squash it even more or process it a little less or whatever. But my intentions were there all along, and they were played to and listened to.
Give us some more tips for running a great recording session, working with a group of musicians, stuff that
make the technical aspect of everything completely transparent. Do not have anybody wait for any decisions you want to make. So be very aware of all of your options and have them all instantly available to you. Always set up an extra room mic, so in case somebody wants to whip an accordion out of their trunk, it's you put it on input. It's ready to go. It's already routed and patched. And I think too many people will discuss the options and, well, let's try this and let's try this. If you want to try 4 different mics on a source in a tracking session when there's a band setup, then set them up during setup. Know what's coming in and know what options you want to try so you're not holding people up. Creative people hate standing around waiting in silence. They all hate it. I get to be on the other side of the glass as a guitar player too, and I'm a pretty good engineer as far as, I'm speedy on Pro Tools, and I'm pretty good at thinking on my feet and patching things in, and it drives me nuts. I just want to take over the whole session when I have to sit and wait, or if I ask for something and it's not available. So just be very aware. I mean, if you want to swap mics out on a singer, man, set the 3 mics up so that they can just move their head, because if you are unscrewing cradles and changing the power blocks and patching stuff in, they're going to lose their vibe. They're going to lose their mojo. We are in the atmosphere business where we are all about the vibe. We're the only ones that care about the technical process.
I love that. That's going to be tweeted out before you know it, man. We are in the atmosphere business. It's all about the vibe, man. That's great. Make some t-shirts too.
Yeah.
A couple of quick things. I know you probably work with an assistant sometimes getting ready for sessions. Any good tips for just the communication process of getting those ideas down and mic lists written up so that things go smoothly during a setup?
Yeah, really know your gear and really be prepared ahead of time. I mean, I have an amazing engineer here, which is Ethan Barrett, and he knows every mic, every tie line, every patch, every option in this studio. And I don't take that for granted that he'll just do everything for me. I sit down before a session and I make a mic list and a patch list and an option list, and I send it to him and say, let's do it this way this time. I have some ideas I'd like to try, or let's route the headphones this way. So don't just walk in and wing it, man. Be prepared. Really know what you're walking into.
Would you typically write out an email to Ethan, or do you guys use tools like Google Docs where you do a spreadsheet for him, or any little tricks like that?
We have a few Excel spreadsheets and things like that. That's more for studio maintenance, and we have tube lists and like have a lot of tubes in here. So if I am missing a 6BQ7 and we use the last one, we'll see the inventory depleted and order some more and things like that. There's a regular studio maintenance. I could probably automate. I mean, I have one template with an inventory of stuff. It's just easier for me to make an input list and email it to him.
What's the process when a mic cable seems a little sketchy? What's the first thing that happens to that mic
I put it in
cable?
an NFG pile, and if it doesn't get fixed, it gets thrown out.
NFG?
No freaking good.
No freaking good. Okay, cool. I want to jump to a tip from Pro Tools from you, because you are fast on Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And I know you're one of the faster vocal compers.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little about vocal comping? Explain
and I
what
used
people
to
need to know
actually,
about that.
because of by popular request, I used to have a video tutorial where I had it on a website and had posted it, and I don't know if you can still find it around. I should probably do another updated one because there's been a few updates to Pro Tools itself. I use a couple of things. I use dynamic transport, and that is Control-Command-P to enable and disable it, and you'll actually see the ruler above the edit window expand and detract because it adds one extra area or region where you can select your playback region that isn't defined by your edit selection, which is very important for being able to play back from wherever you want, but keep a region highlighted.
So what you highlight on the screen doesn't tell the play transport
Pro Tools where to play
either.
back. Yeah, by clicking up in the dynamic transport bar, that tells Pro Tools where to play back.
And that's I always described it as the box with the lollipops on it.
There you go. And so I don't solo or mute or deal with any of those underlying playlists. I create a comp track up top, and I use that track up top as the only thing I ever listen to or monitor in real time. If I put a region up there, and I guess we should call them clips now, because the West kind of won at one point with Avid. So when I put a clip up there, if I just highlight a little word below, if I'm comping through, I'll use the letter P and the colon
to
keys
go up and down
to toggle up and down. And I'm very fast, man. This sounds awful. This sounds like the longest explanation in the world. But I can instantly just grab like the word "and" in the middle of a phrase and pop it up top. But because I have dynamic transport, play the whole phrase and toggle down to the next one and promote it up to the top, so that I'm constantly just promoting what I'm auditioning. And once I actually like it, I just move the cursor.
Move on. You're done. You don't have to select it because you just did.
It's already done. It's selected.
Yeah, cool.
It's all good. There's not that extra stage of soloing things and not hearing them in context. I always hated not hearing something in context. And I used to use many, many years ago in the dinosaur days of Pro Tools, I would use voice allocation to perform similar things, but it was very lethargic.
Yeah.
I use dynamic transport in tandem with always listening to the active top playlist and then promoting whatever I want to hear inside the my comp, and then moving through the timeline by moving the dynamic transport playback insertion.
Dynamic transport playback insertion. Remember that, everybody.
The DP something I.
So one of the things that really makes my head hurt when I'm comping vocals is trying to remember that I like take 7, 11, and 13 or something, and then flipping around and getting lost.
Yeah, this virtually eliminates that to a certain extent.
I think you're going to have to make that screencast video again.
Yeah, I probably should. And also just a tip, color code everything. Take the 30 seconds to select all and use P and bracket to toggle up and down and color all of your regions so that you know exactly what take they came from.
Yeah.
And label and number everything. It only takes a second. So that take 1 is always 1, 3 is 3, 7 is 7. It's, the biggest problem I watch other people comping, they've created a whole playlist by dragging a clip or a region down and it gets auto-named some arbitrary weird numbered thing with a dot dupe. They're auditioning through scenarios by soloing the different playlists, and somebody likes, I like that blue one, but there's 3 blue ones, and they just kind of eye up the real estate and think they know where it is, and it drives me nuts, man.
Yeah.
I am definitely OCD.
Well, I think the thing that always frustrated me too was the first track that gets recorded in Pro Tools is the name of the track, vocal. And then take 2 is actually called vocal.01.
Yeah. Pro Tools has a lot of work to do. But I actually create a whole session template and then I click group all and then I use control / bracket thing to make a new playlist. So I always start on .01.
Nice.
And I use my non-numbered named tracks as the comp.
As the comp track, that's smart. And you make that the one that goes on top. Now,
That's
what do
right.
you do when you've got your comp and you're like, I think I want to do an alternate comp?
I label it .comp and then I label it .comp1.
And which one becomes the one that you always want to be on the top of your playlist? Is it still the 0, just the name of the track, and .comp1 is the alternate?
It'll be whatever logically makes sense looking at it saying, this was
our third
the
comp.
Latest decision.
Yeah,
if
okay,
there's
cool.
3 comps, then I fire the band. No, I'm kidding.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we can take a break now. We'll come back in just for the jam session here in just a sec. But before we do, Rockstars, I just want to remind you, as I always like to do, you'll find show notes to everything we're talking about at rsrockstars.com or recordingstudiorockstars.com, and just use the magnifying glass to look for David Kalmusky, and that's with a K,
That is with a K.
Musky. Also, if you're on your phone right now, you can just click through and you should see the show notes right there with this podcast episode playing. You can just touch it with your finger and it will take you right to the links so you can go check out this cool stuff we're talking about. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys in just a moment for the jam session. Hey everybody, it's Lid Shaw, and I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of Recording Studio Rockstars. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your time. And as a way of saying thank you, I've created a special mix tutorial just for you, Rockstars, totally free, called the Mix Master Bundle. With it, you get over 2 hours of detailed videos watching over my shoulder as I mix a song in my studio. Plus, I give you the free ebook that explains how I recorded the tracks. And you get downloadable multitracks so that you can practice your mixes, including the Pro Tools session file, using nothing but stock plugins in Pro Tools, all of which you would find in any other DAW, whether you're on Logic or Studio One or Reaper. Maybe you're struggling with trying to improve your mix technique, or maybe you just simply don't have access to multitrack files or can't record a full drum set in your studio. I wanted to give you a chance to create your own mixes from full drum kit, bass, and guitars recorded in my studio. The song is called American Winter, and it's off my instrumental record Skadoosh, and it's all available for you totally free right now. All you need to do to get it is text Mix Master Bundle to 33444, and I'll send it directly to your email. Again, that's Mix Master Bundle with no space to 33444, or you can go directly to mixmasterbundle.com, enter your email, and I'll send all the files directly to you. Thanks so much, Rockstars. We'll see you guys in the jam session. Cheers. Hey Rockstars, we're back and we're here for the jam session with our guest David Kalmusky at Addiction Sound Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. David, are you ready to jam?
I'm ready to jam, man.
All right, sweet, man. So when you got started out in recording, what was one of the things that was holding you back? I mean, obviously there was a lot that wasn't. Maybe it was the elbow macaroni?
Well, I'm actually going to say I am a stubborn, persistent little bastard, and there is nothing that has held me back. My advice is don't wait for opportunity. Like I said earlier, there is no opportunity. Just do everything that you want to do. There was never a moment where I wanted to record. I know I had a unique situation as a teenager, being away from my father and his musical friends in the studio. You know, I was in a small town without much going on. I was still writing and recording and making music. I don't wait till there's a project on my plate to come to the studio. I'm here every day.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing that your dad had friends that were in the studio, and they probably had, sons and daughters too that maybe didn't pursue what you did.
Absolutely. And I wasn't always allowed in the studio. There was a lot of stuff going on there, and especially back
maybe
in the
for
day.
Good reason.
Yeah, I used to get mad at my mother, like, why can't I go into the studio? And she'd be like, nope, not a chance, because
wrong move.
She'd shield us from that. And so my point is, I still made my own opportunities. I didn't let anything hold me back. I let my compulsion and my passion, if I wanted to discover something, man, I would just sit and mess around with a microphone and a reel-to-reel for hours. I'd kill a whole weekend in my bedroom just doing it. There's nothing that can hold you back. Don't wait, discover, especially in this day and age, man. You can just start playing with free plugins, and there's amazing free recording DAW software out there you can get on any platform with virtual instruments and anything.
Yeah, I like that advice, man. Don't wait around for some opportunity to allow you to do the thing that you're dreaming of doing.
Just do it right now. Yeah.
Just do it. I need to remember that. I got to go write some songs, man.
Yeah, exactly.
How about some of the best advice you received?
The best advice I received was probably what we touched on a little bit, is like, don't use all your gear, or don't use all your plugins.
It's funny. You said the least important thing in gear is the G. It took me like a minute to get it. And then I was like, oh, I get it now.
That's what's left, man. Listen, just listen. The best advice I ever got was from my dad, which was just listen, just stop and listen. What are you doing? I would jump in ahead of actually having heard anything and start making decisions based on what I thought my knowledge was. And you know what I mean? And I see people still doing that. It's like, just take a second and listen. Whether it's a band coming in, listen to their instruments, listen to their amps, make recommendations at the source. If somebody's got a brittle sound or whatever, don't just dial up your mics and listen through the control room and just make your stock decisions. Use your ears, not your gear.
Okay, first move for mixing something that has just arrived. What's the first thing you do when you're mixing?
Same thing. Listen, push all the faders up into a relative perspective before you reach for EQs, compression. Give a listen to everything that went down. I mean, if there's roughs, check them out. Don't forget, we talked about the psychology of that. If that's what the band has unfortunately been listening to for months, that's your competition to a certain extent. Even if the roughs are awful. I've had roughs that were notably awful, where the band was like, we missed the raw live essence of the roughs. And it's like, no, that wasn't essence. That was, somebody left a room mic up.
A pile of dog turd in the room doesn't, just because you can smell it, that doesn't make it essence,
listen
right?
to everything together. Listen to the relationship. You can't make a mix decision. A mix means mix. It means everything. So check it out, man. See what's happening first. You'll hear problems right away. You'll push everything up and go, oh, wow, there's a lot of bottom end on those guitars. They're competing with the bass notes. How am I going to define the bass? You'll actually start immediately formulating things rather than if you go chronologically, here's my kick sound, here's my snare, and then you dial the hi-hat up and then tom 1, 2, and 3, and then you push the overheads up, or some people mix the kit backwards with the overheads first. Whatever, if you have a process, don't go there first. Because by the time you get to that bass guitar, you've already made kick decisions for bottom end. And then you carve the bass guitar a little bit just with bass and drums. You get to those guitars and realize, oh, all my bottom end decisions are different. You got to listen to the whole recording, just kind of roughed in on the faders.
Yeah. All right. So how about a great recording tip, hack, or secret sauce? Something that our rock stars can use today on making a record in their studio.
Have fun, man, and play with some weird, cool, cheap devices. We talked about my Shure PA mixer, but I have a record cutter here and a couple of things in the analog realm. If you're going to be an audio engineer, even if you're just playing in the box, explore some weird real-time analog things. And, you can get a little handheld tape recorder, a cassette recorder, or, a little reel-to-reel recorder or something. bounce a track over to it, and then put it back into Pro Tools and line it up as close as you can with all the analog drift that doesn't allow it to line up, and use it as a double.
Right.
And it's cool. Sometimes there's a pre-emphasis on a word if you use it on a vocal because the analog recording sneaks ahead. Then allow that to happen and chop it, and then just move the rest of the file back a little bit.
That's a little bit what the ADT
delay
thing is, right? The John Lennon automatic double tracking.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have access to that or that's a plugin, play with that. Play with plugins, man. They make your own presets. Don't use stock reverbs and stuff. Use them as a starting place and create your own sound. Here's the thing. The coolest trick you could ever do is being unique. You have to start, like I said, when you're starting out, if you don't know how something goes, use the general consensus, the basis of knowledge. If you don't know how to mic a snare drum, put a 57 on it, don't EQ it, get it into a clean pre, make sure you're not hitting it too hard. And now you're recording snare like a professional.
Yeah.
But as far as taking elements on top of a mix, be unique. Find spaces and record them like they're part of the performance. I have an echo chamber, 2 plates, digital reverbs, lots of plugins, and sometimes I record the bathroom upstairs with a pair of speakers in it because it's the right ambience for a recording.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know why this popped into my head, but you're talking about 57 and checking out the snare. If you haven't done it yet, try recording your entire drum kit with just that 157. Put it in different places where it doesn't belong.
Absolutely. Learn your environment and your options. You may actually come across something magic and keep it in the back of your head, and then someday pull it out for a recording and make the next Led Zeppelin 2 or Led Zeppelin 4.
I did a record where we had mic'd up the drum kit, sort of traditionally. And then there was one song where we just put one mic on the drums. It was on a single track. And as far as I remember, that was, the producer, the label that was one of his favorite tracks.
Huh.
Here I am trying to impress the label with all the traditional professional moves. And he liked the one where I broke all the rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So now how about a favorite hardware tool in the studio? Now this could be something unexpected. It doesn't, we don't have to bring up the 1176 or something like that. It could be, some physical piece of object.
You know what? I'll bring out my favorite cheap piece of gear because this is kind of on every vocal that I have.
Not for long on eBay after you tell us, right?
Yeah. Every vocal I've ever put out into public in the last decade, I've got a $100 Orban de-esser on it.
Nice.
It's my favorite de-esser. It's really natural. It's got one knob on it, and it is, it's an Orban 526A de-esser. And I've got right above it some very expensive BSS de-essers and lots of... my favorite de-esser in the box is the Massey de-esser. The interesting thing is, I've got a very expensive, I got a 175B across a vocal, but my de-esser of choice is, I think I got them for $100. And I thought I had discovered some magical secret universe that maybe the universe of engineers hadn't discovered with this Orban stuff. So I went on eBay and I bought every piece of Orban gear I could possibly find because I was like, I've never seen an Orban anything in any studios, and this de-esser I think is awesome.
And they've always got the nice light blue.
Yeah, and so I checked their parametric EQ. It was, for my taste, it was awful, and I checked every piece of gear, and I was like, I sold it all on eBay, kind of upset. That I hadn't discovered everything. And that therein lies the rule that you can generally rely on the commonality of choices and wisdom from studio. You see a lot of 1176s in the studio and LA2As, and they have their place for a reason. And there's a reason why you don't see a lot of that other stuff in the studio. But I gotta say, I don't see a lot of these Orbans in the studio, and they're pretty darn good.
I'll have to look for it. I have the DBX 902s.
It's like everything I reach for on one little knob. It's for me, it's like a Waves plugin. They just, whatever's in that box, they just kind of got it right. You just touch one thing and go, oh, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And it doesn't put a sock over it or make a lisp. It just kind of tames down that super top end.
Cool, man. Right on. All right. So now how about a favorite software tool? Speaking of plugins.
Favorite software tool. Now we're getting into awesomeness too, because it's such an exciting, I'm totally not an analog snob. People look at my gear and think that I'm like, oh no, analog's better. like I said, I've got a record cutter from 1938 beside an iPad, and I use them all. And when it comes to plugins, such an exciting time for audio to have the capability of doing things with look-ahead compression that is impossible to do in the analog world without actually really elaborately delaying tracks for sidechain preemphasis and forward reading has always been almost impossible in the analog realm unless you're delaying 23 of 24 tracks,
right.
Which is just, who wants to go through any of that?
Flip the tape over, delay something, pre-emphasize it on its own
ridiculous.
track.
Yeah. Nevertheless, some tools that are in the box that are amazing for me is Dynamic Spectrum Mapper. It's like having a 40,000 band dynamic EQ.
Yeah.
For matching vocals and for taking the bite out of a vocal without notching it and making it sound really unnatural. If I have a vocalist that rings in a certain frequency, that 3.2 kilohertz bite, it'll take it completely out of just those moments, but completely leave it untouched when it's unnecessary. The FabFilter Pro QEQ for me is one of the greatest surgical and musical EQs, like all in one thing. I put it across my 2-mix, and it's just always on my 2-bus. I love it for shaping my 2-mix. It's unbelievable. And if I have any surgery to do on any individual thing, it's unbelievable. You can just keep adding bands and adding bands. I can destroy things so much with that. It's awesome.
One of the things I really love about the FabFilter Pro EQ, because I started using it recently, is the real-time analyzer. You just see what you're
I leave it on my
working on.
2-mix all the time, man, and it's a fantastic tool for so many reasons. I'm such a big fan of all the soft synths that are coming out. I do a lot of production as well, like in arranging and playing, and so I use all the Output Sounds stuff. Anytime Output Sounds comes up with Signal or Pulse or any of their expression packs, I just buy it instantly. I don't even listen to it or audition it. I go to the site and I buy it. That's another company that is just making really great expressive instrument stuff. So,
and you're a keyboard player as well. Or are you using these sounds sometimes for
no, I'm a
musicians that
guitar
are
player. I'm
coming
a
in?
really horrible keyboard player, but our Fazioli has MIDI.
Mm-hmm.
So every piano performance I capture, I get a MIDI track.
Interesting.
And sometimes I'll layer a synth in behind it or something really cool, or sometimes I'll elect not to even use the piano and use the piano performance to create a synth pad or a pulse or an arpeggio or something. I also have guitar synths like a GK, so I can play, I'm not going to do solos, but I'm going to, if I need to do a quick string pad, I just do it on a guitar because I have way more knowledge and natural voicings on that instrument. But I play a little bit of keyboards. If I'm doing really heavy keyboard-oriented stuff, I always have a keyboard player on the session. I hire piano players and keyboard players. Nashville's got
That's
some
cool.
of the
I like
greatest
that
in the
insight
world.
into the piano MIDI, and you're using a guitar.
I always
controller for
record
this.
MIDI, not because I necessarily want to change the keyboard player's sound, but it just gives me lots of cool options. Sometimes I'll trigger timed loops around the MIDI, and I'll just use what the keyboard player's provided, and it'll create some weird, cool, random rhythmic arpeggiation that, by flipping through presets or whatever.
I know you've used Pro Tools for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
How would
Since
you
the
explain?
beginning.
Yeah, exactly. How would you explain to somebody who's sort of choosing their first DAW what the benefits for them might be of choosing Pro Tools as an option?
The only benefits to Pro Tools is that it exists everywhere. We live in a world where I can't argue what's the best DAW. There are some amazing DAWs. Studio One's incredible, lots of Logic users. There's still 4 or 5 Nuendo users. No,
That's a shout out to you guys.
Yeah, you know who you are. So I'm saying that there's no benefit to using one over the other than if you want to instantly collaborate with every studio in the world, everyone still has Pro Tools.
So now you've worked with a great number of people. Have you seen people that seem equally fast and equally skilled on different DAW platforms?
I do, but I feel like they're all frustrated and they're all very limited. I actually just worked on an album last week where everyone, they were using a different DAW, and there was so much consolidating and printing and translating tracks and then reloading tracks into a playlist format so that they could comp them afterwards and later. They were literally on a 14-song album spending 2-3 extra days compiling that data to go to another format to make their editing decisions, and they're going to have to export everything back to WAV files, and then someone's going to have to create a Pro Tools session. Again,
so maybe just start with Pro Tools.
You know, that's what I'm saying is, man, I am not a Pro Tools evangelist. I'm just saying they won.
Right.
They won at some point. I'm well aware. We've got friends that make DAWs. I've got dear friends that are involved. I help, you know, as you do, help brainstorm with some of these other DAW manufacturers to maybe what's missing. And I'm very impressed with what's out there and the workflow. And I know that there's better workflow than maybe even what I have in a certain element. But when you wrap up all those workflows with the fact that I can do any bit of work that I need to do, and I can instantly close it and walk to any studio in the world, any of my musician collaborators in the world, go over to their house, double click a file, and all of my decisions open up instantly and play. That's the advantage to Pro Tools. I can add to it there. We can share stuff on a Dropbox. It's just the fact that it won, so it's everywhere. We can walk around Berry Hill right now with a hard drive, go into 30 studios, and instantly play, record, collaborate, edit our stuff, save and close, and it translates every time we open it.
So true, so true. So I guess the real winner, though, is the consumer, because you're out there, Rockstar, you're trying to decide what you want to use, where you want to go with it, and invest your time, your 10,000 hours. The answer is all your choices are good ones, you know, especially if, you know, being in an environment with 30 other studios isn't necessarily your top priority, but, you know, something that works for you in your home space. I have noticed one thing I enjoy seeing, and for example, with Studio One that I admire about those guys is they seem to be moving quickly, you know, which is nice to see.
Yeah, and, you know, honestly,
iterating.
As far as total entry level, I had a friend of mine who said my son just wants to, you know, make some beats and play with some bass lines and get into some things.
It's already in there, GarageBand.
Well, no, but kind of next level stuff. And he had a PC. And so I looked at some of the free stuff, and Studio One is an amazing package. Studio One Free is an amazing package. Studio One as a DAW, to have every vocal you record is automatically already in some version of Melodyne. It's actually really amazing.
Yeah.
Bottom line, if you're looking at breaking into being in the industry, and you're looking at sharing that wisdom that I said, when I have a problem and it takes me 7 days to uncover it, and I can impart that wisdom on you in 3 seconds, if you choose something other than Pro Tools, you don't get to collaborate in that pool of knowledge and resources. Whereas every engineer you meet in Nashville, every studio you meet on the pro level is going to be able to impart some kind of wisdom based on Pro Tools and a Pro Tools workflow.
The advice, I think, is, you know, if you want to be able to tap into that pool of wisdom, drink from the same Kool-Aid.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Whatever.
You know, and I mean, there might be a better workflow in Logic for certain things. And I mean, honestly, if you are an instrumentalist doing sound score stuff and you're using all virtual instruments, then get very used to using Logic or whatever your choice is, printing WAV files and bringing lined up WAV files. But don't ever impart your translation workflow on anyone else. My advice is, if you're going to choose a different platform than the mainstream, then you be the guy that knows everything, that brings everything, that perfectly lines up, that has the tempo notated. In fact, you should always have the cheapest version of Pro Tools. You bring a Pro Tools session to a studio that has all that work done. Then you take that work home and you get it back into Studio One or Logic or Nuendo. Because I know a lot of people who have shown up at a studio and just expected the house engineer to be able to translate stuff. They haven't checked whether the WAV files were consolidated properly or not, or whether they line up, or all the mono audio is printed as stereo files.
Right,
and
that happens all the time.
It's a big mess, you know, and don't think that every house engineer and every second engineer knows every DAW, and they all know Pro Tools. So if you choose something different than the mainstream, then you need to be the captain of that.
Good advice, man. All right, now let's jump to the last question. We'll just jump right ahead. Tell our listeners, what's the single most important thing they can do to be a rock star of the recording studio themselves?
Learn what everybody else is doing, understand it, and then don't fit in.
Nice. Be an individual.
Yeah.
Be unique. You're harder to replace if you're unique.
You're impossible to replace. stopped getting calls somewhere along the way for people that were going down a list looking for someone who was available to cut a vocal Tuesday at 2:00. And somehow every single time I get a call or an email for any work, it is, hey, open up your calendar. When can we do this piece of work? I'm not the negotiable part in this. And if this studio, God forbid, had a flood, it's still me. I would take them to Quad or Ocean Way or House of Blues or Sound Emporium, and we would continue to work. I'm not the negotiable. It's not about the place anymore.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is about you. And the more unique you become in this, at the beginning, like I said, learn what everybody else is doing, because that's the commonality of excellence. That is operating within the parameters. If you change everything from the beginning and you're just a complete alien, you're alienating your chances of actually participating to the point where you get to become unique. So figure it out fast, get good in the commonality of it, and then start making some interesting decisions that get great feedback that make people want you.
Yeah, good advice, man. Good advice. All right, cool, man. Well, thank you so much, David, for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. It's been an awesome hang. And
yeah, man.
We could just keep going and going and going. But before we do check out, can you tell our listeners, Rockstars, how they can learn more about you and where they can find out more about you and Addiction Sound Studios?
I suck at like the whole internet thing, but follow me on Instagram.com/Kalmusky, Facebook/Kalmusky. I'm the only Kalmusky in the business.
That's good.
That is in America. So if you just put /Kalmusky anything, you'll probably get me. It's cool. Like my website is kalmusky.com. Facebook is /Kalmusky. Instagram is /Kalmusky.
Do you guys do an individual site for Addiction Sound?
Oh, yeah. Actually, addictionsound.com.
Yeah, okay. Either way, you'll find it.
And we have an Addiction Sound Studios Facebook as well, too. Actually, the Facebook is Addiction Studios, and the website is Addiction Sound.
Okay, groovy. All right, well, thanks so much, dude. Really a pleasure hanging out with you, and I'll see you around the studio.
All right, man.
All right, cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.